a special weekend of Rolling Stones. Well, this came about because recently on Patreon, the monthly winner of the album Complete Listen was Rolling Stones' Let It Bleed. And I listened to the complete album for the very first time, and you can watch that here. But I have chosen this weekend to return to a couple songs which I just personally enjoyed from that album and stood out to me for enjoyment's sake. The first one is Love in Vain. Let's start by watching my first listen.
Well, I followed her to the station with a suitcase in my hand. Yeah, I followed her to the station with a suitcase in my hand. In the eye. Well, the train come in the station, and I looked her in the eye. Whoa, I felt so sad, so lonesome, that I could not help but cry.
What a song. Okay. What should I say? I mean, should I say I loved it? You know, I guess I will say I loved it. It caught my imagine. Okay, let me just gather myself here for a second. All right, let me start with the first thing that really grabbed me. Okay, the intro was nice, kind of gentle, pleasant to listen to, guitar, whatever, fine. It was enjoyable, and I was starting to think, this might be kind of nice. The voice, when the voice came in, so much the center point of the piece. It is the song. And he sang it so incredibly well. And why do I say that? Well, the thing that really fascinates me about this song is the way in which it evokes a kind of understanding that we are listening to a train. And yet it's not exactly mimicking the train sounds. Well, I fall. Okay, the way he holds that long note and he holds it, there's a slight bend to it, and it carries on and carries on. It is in a way, it's the train's whistle. It is. And every time he sings on a long note and holds it out, it's the same sort of haunting, tug at your heartstrings, thrill your soul, throwback to the romantic steam train days. Doo, doo. It's that sort of mournful, lonely, and at the same time so intense and pointed and focused in the way it hits me. And it's such a feature of the song. It is the way the melody is built. It's for these long train whistle notes to be sung, which makes the melody itself and the song being sung itself have a similar, it evokes, as I said, it evokes the similar emotions we might feel when we're thinking back to the glory days of steam train era and remembering those whistles that would come through. So that is one thing. But that's not the only thing. The other thing the voice does, let's see if I can recall the name of this song, which I have listened both to the original and the cover. In the Pines, Where Did You Sleep Last Night? And I'm thinking especially of the kind of haunting, lonely, mournful quality which it builds in us without being, there's a strength to it as well. I will put it that way. There's a strength in that loneliness. It is the pioneer spirit. It is the resilient, wild spirit. My love, where did you sleep last night? In the pines, and so on. Well, here it's a whole different scenario. Well, I followed her to the station with a suitcase in my hand. I mean, again, the lyrics are not terribly developed. Well, I followed her to the station with a suitcase in my hands. But it's not about the lyrics being developed. It's about the raw expression of emotion that comes in the way it's sung. Also, the instrumentation, the accompaniment as it progressed, I was fascinated by the way in which that also captured different elements of this moment at the train station. The deep bass, the percussion, the guitar, which towards the end you could hear, again, the train whistle, only no longer coming towards us. It's fading away, and it's in the higher range. All of this fascinating way that it builds this image and makes us sense the whole experience without actually mimicking or simply trying to recreate or I'm struggling to come up with a way of explaining the difference, really, because it's a subtle difference. But I would never listen to this song and say, oh, you want to hear a song that sounds like a train? You want to hear a train whistle? You want to hear something that is... No, it's not that, because it's simply taking the quality and the elements and applying them to this emotional scenario, which happens to be around a station and the train. And I think it's fabulous. I think it's really great. So, all right, that's Love in Vain. My first time hearing Love in Vain. I guess I'll be returning to that to enjoy it more in the future, because it's one that I think has a lot to explore and appreciate in detail as well, even though it's really quite a simple song. But sometimes simplicity doesn't mean simple in a negative manner. Many times simplicity is the ultimate. And here we have one in which it's simple, but it is so evocative. I like that. Okay, moving on. Next we have Country Honk. All right, let's see how this sounds. Love in Vain, originally titled Love in Vain Blues, is a blues song written by American musician Robert Johnson, vocal accompanied by his fingerstyle acoustic guitar playing, and first recorded in 1937. In 1969, the Rolling Stones recorded an updated rendition featuring an electric slide guitar solo. The popularity of their adaptation led to a lawsuit over the copyright, which was eventually resolved in favor of Johnson's estate. Since then, various artists have recorded the song. Well, after I learned that, I had to go look up Robert Johnson's original performance. And I found it, and I listened. It has that old, traditional folk blues feel, at least what I envision as being how I would describe it. And there's this incredible, desolate, raw feel to it. It's so simple. It's just his voice and finger-picking guitar. But it leaves you feeling devastated. And one of the things that I enjoyed about it is how it distills and really points towards the vivid imagery of the lyrics, and I just found it incredibly rawly poetic, or poetically raw. But as I said, this is one of the songs that stood out to me on the Rolling Stones album, and I think there are some good reasons why it became such a popular Rolling Stones associated track. So let's explore and listen.
Well, I followed up.
You know, one of the things that I like about this is the sort of lilting, rippling sound of the introduction. And it's one of the things that I don't associate very strongly with the blues style, this sort of compound time feel. Ya da 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 dum da da dum dum bum bum. It almost has a sort of dance feel to it. I mean not modern dance, but a sort of not quite waltz, because it's triplet. It's compound time, with the triplet divisions of the beats. 1 da da 2 da da 3 da da 4 da da. But it feels nice, and it sets up this incredibly elegant feel before we get to what this is really all about. And another thing that I like about it is that it feels free. And there's a special reason why it feels free. It starts out, yum, ba-da-dum, ba-da-dum, and we start to feel the consistency of the beat pattern happening. But then, as soon as we've settled into that, we then get to this little insertion here of a partial bar. And it happens so naturally. Of course, this is a transcription someone wrote out after the fact. And you can see visually why we end up with that sort of rippling bum da 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 dum da da dum ba da dum, and it just feels like it kind of ripples and doesn't have any squareness to it. And then we go bum bum ba dum, and then we fall back into ya ba da da. I'll point it out to you as we listen. Here we go. Bum 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 ba da dum bum bum. Da da dum da da dum da da dum. And this is a bit like a fermata. And then we're back into this. And then finally, as we are starting to fall back into this, ya da 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 da, then the voice comes in. Oh wow, it catches our attention. It's so intense, and right from the beginning, you feel like it is packed, dripping with this sort of looking back on some other time. It's the tone of the voice. Well, I followed her. And even before you really even recognize what's being sung, well, I followed her, the voice gives it away. It is something from a time past. And finally, at that point, the guitar locks us in again and gives us a clear beat. I think that all of these details about the intro are one of the things that make this stand out.
Well, I followed her to the station.
You feel the beat as it keeps you going, and you have these long hands.
Yeah, I followed her to the station.
And there is the other guitar coming in.
With a suitcase in my hand. Whoa, it's hard to tell. When all you love's in vain.
I think that slide guitar, the electric guitar that is not the acoustic, and I think it's a slide guitar based on what I read and also what I'm hearing, that sort of warping and sliding the pitch a bit. I like the way it's inserted tastefully, meaning the song is not loaded with that sound. But it feels like, just as he says, as he sings, well, I followed her to the station. And then he gets to with a suitcase in my hand. And the hand word gets, the vowel becomes this long sliding and changing and shifting through the entire word.
Followed her to the station.
Station.
With a suitcase in my hand.
And then, as we get to, yeah, I followed her, that's when the slide guitar comes in. And it comes in with a doing, which kind of emphasizes and becomes an instrumental version of this hand, you know, and it becomes a kind of dance between the slide guitar and the voice in terms of those pitch and vowel warpings, slidings. And I think that the way the slide guitar interacts with the voice, I think that is one of the things that makes this so poignant, so beautiful in that way. And it's the plucked guitar which keeps things stable enough that we can fight against it with the slide and the warp.
With a suitcase.
You hear the guitar really emphasizing. Da 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 dee da 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 da. So then we feel.
With a suitcase in my hand.
One of the things that one has to do when we want to really emphasize and put up on a pedestal and make a focal point some musical element, something happening in the music, we have to create a contrast, or we have to create some support, some pedestal. And if we're dealing with warped pitches, sliding pitches, shifting fluid vowel shapings and reshapings, then the best way to really make those pop out and become a thing of interest is to give something incredibly stable and consistent to set them in relief. If this plucked guitar, finger-picking guitar, weren't part of the music, or if it were more flexible itself, then all of this expressive use of the warp and the bend and the slide, which we hear both in the voice and in the other guitar, it wouldn't have the same impact. Even if you doubled the intensity of it, even if you exaggerated the sliding and the bending and the shape shifting of the vowels even further, it wouldn't have the same effect. And that's one of the things that makes this work so incredibly well, is because you have the stability of a very delicate, elegant guitar accompaniment, which is at the same time anchored so strongly in a consistent beat pattern. Interesting that it's not a four-square beat pattern. It's the compound triplet rippling pattern, which gives its own interest, but that ends up not being the focal point of the piece. It ends up being the platform on which everything else is elevated.
Yeah, I followed her to the station with a suitcase in my hand. Whoa, it's hard to tell when all you love's in vain.
And wait.
When the train
And here come the drums, helping out the acoustic, the finger picking guitar.
Well, the train come in the station, and I looked her in the eye.
It's so strong, this beat, because we need it.
I felt so sad, so lonesome, that I could not help but cry.
It's a kind of tension, it's a kind of dissonance. And I've talked a lot in various videos, pieces that I've listened to, about the role dissonance plays in music. And many times I'm talking in the context of harmonic dissonance, when we have notes that clash and then which resolve to a more smooth harmonic release. Example, something like this, or even something like this, which then resolves to something sweet and gentle. That is the simplest, I don't know if I'd call it simplest, but it's the most common kind of dissonance we think of when we think of dissonance in music. But it is not the only kind, and it's a very limited musical approach to think of that as the only possible dissonance. Here we have a different kind of dissonance. We have a dissonance in terms of, it's a kind of tug of war. Think of it like if you want to pull a rubber band, or let's get even bigger, a bungee cord, something that with a lot of resistance, and you need to pull and stretch it. You need something solid for your feet to stand on so that you can be pulling and be able to brace yourself against that stable ground or other stable object. And the bungee cord itself has to be anchored to something incredibly stable too. Otherwise, it's just going to slide. It won't get the tension, the stretch, the pull. This is what's happening in the music here. You have to have this incredible stability, this object on which to anchor the music, so that everything else can be pulled and you feel the stretch of it and you feel the tension, the dissonance between what is stable and what is not. That is the rub, the point of friction in this piece. The incredibly clean, straight, and it's not just rhythmically straight, but the plucked guitar is also very harmonically clean, isn't it? It's every pitch is exactly the same pitch. Clean, precise, elegant, yes, but precise and clean. And that clarity is one of the things against which the voice and the slide guitar fight and rub against. That is the friction point. And that is why we feel so incredibly powerfully the sourness, the sweet pain of those features of the music.
Not heal, but cry.
Listen. It's against this incredibly strong and clear. Now here's the mandolin. And we hear the drums behind it. We hear the plucked guitar. We hear the atmospheric slide guitar. And this mandolin is somewhere in the middle, between the two. It's filling it out. This delicacy. And the bass. Just waiting.
When the train left the station.
Don't you love the way it feels like, because of that pause, because of that moment of waiting there at the end of the solo, it doesn't just launch straight into the next verse. There's a little bit of a quiet moment. And then when the drums come and everything comes back in and the voice, there's a sort of lurch as if the train is getting started, and you can see the entire thing starting to move. This is what comes next.
When the train
And it lurches into motion.
left the station.
And he keeps it going and going and going and going.
Two lights on behind. Yeah, when the train left the station.
I like the way the bass is helping.
On behind.
Now this is going back to the original author of this song, Robert Johnson. And as I mentioned in the intro, the incredibly vivid, poetic imagery of this song. When the train left the station, it had two lights on behind. Okay, so we have a picture in our minds. It's really vivid. It's clear. It's relatable. It's understandable. It's basic in a way. Train had two lights on behind, but listen to what comes from that image.
Yeah, when the train left the station. Yeah, two lights on behind. Whoa, the blue light was my baby.
Ah,
Red light was my mind.
think about that. We have just gone from an inanimate piece of equipment. When the train left the station, it had two lights on behind. It's, smoke and steel and metal rails and everything that is a train. And we've felt it lurch as it gets into motion, and we've seen it. We've heard it in the music keep going as he sings and his voice continues on. But then, when the train left the station, it had two lights on behind. The blue light was my baby. The red light was my mind. And suddenly we're taken from the train to the person. Inside that person, the red light was my mind. In fact, you might even take it a bit further, and it was more than just the mind. It was the inner person, the heart, the feelings, the emotions, everything that was going churning in his mind in that moment. The red light was my mind. The blue light was my baby. And suddenly there's this feeling of being torn in two. Two lights on the train as it's leaving the station. And then the sense that those suddenly represent the person standing there watching the train leave. And it's not the train that he's watching leaving. It's this other individual whom he loves deeply. The blue light was my baby. The red light was my mind. And then we feel that the tearing apart of those two, because one is still standing in the station, but we also feel that his affections and his thoughts are traveling with the train, because both lights are on the train, and both it's so incredibly poetically vivid and colorful and descriptive and complex. I'm not an expert in blues music. I haven't heard tons and tons of blues music, but I guess this is one which really stands out to me as having not only a very authentic emotion, but one that, because blues is known for its emotional expression, expressiveness, and it's so well suited to that. And there's a lot of authenticity in the blues music in that regard, but also the poetry, the poetic element. In this last verse, it just comes in and destroys you. It's so devastatingly beautiful, and it's in such simple language, so unpretentious, so unpracticed. Just a few simple phrases, and it manages to lay everything flat, just like that. And the way the instruments support this sort of chugging, lurching, but there's a heaviness to it. And that little guitar melody there.
The blue light was my baby, and the red light was my mind.
That bass there, walk dee 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 da, dee 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 da, dee dee dee. So final, walking down, descending. And then the voice here. And there's that guitar bit again. It is an incredibly powerfully presented, performed piece of music. Now, in addition to all of these things that I've been talking about, I wanted to mention also something which I think is specific to Rolling Stones, and probably one of the reasons that it says in the intro, the Rolling Stones recorded an updated rendition. If we go through this piece and look at it harmonically, we notice right away that while it is very blues-based, even the harmonic layout isn't really classic blues anymore. And there are insertions of other chords in places where you don't normally see that in blues. Well, what is the classic blues pattern? 12-bar blues. You have 3 chords. Quite simply 3 chords. You have your 1 chord, which in this case would be the B flat. You have the 4 chord, which in this case would be E flat. And you have the 5 chord, which would be in this case F. 3 chords. But more than just 3 chords, we also have a specific pattern sequence in which those chords are presented in the standard 12-bar blues format. It's a very mathematical formula, really. We have 4 bars of the 1 chord. Then you typically have 2 bars of the 4 chord, followed by 2 bars of the 1 chord. Then, to close it up, you typically have a bar of 5, a bar of 4, and a bar of 1. So, 2 bars of 1, rather. So, it would sound like this. First 4 bars, I'll just play 1 chord per bar. Next 2 bars. And then after those bars, you have a 5, 4, and 1. And that's your classic format. Sometimes the 1 turns into a 5 just for a turnaround. But the idea is, it is mathematically consistent. Of course, there are occasionally modifications because in music you never have a rule unless there's the reason to break a rule. However, that is your classic blues format. Now let's look at what we have here. If we start right where the verse begins, we see that the first thing we have is our 1 chord, which is the B flat. Okay. How many bars of that? 1, 2, 3, 4. Fair enough. Starting out looking like the blues. Next bar is E flat. Well, that's pretty standard. That's the first bar of 4. But here's one of the modifications here. The next bar, rather than being another identical, instead we have a 5. I'll put an X, not because it's wrong, but because it's different. Then we go back to the 1, predictable, standard. But here is an insertion in the same bar, which means even though we're kind of sitting where it's standard, we're going to throw something in extra. I'll put a plus here, not because it's wrong, but because it's added in addition to the pattern. Okay, and then we finish up with this, fairly consistent. Next, we should expect a bar of 5, a bar of 4, and 2 bars of 1 or 1, 5. So what do we have? This is good. There's a bar of 5. Ooh, surprise! This bar doesn't start off with 4. It starts off with an added chord, something that is not in the standard 12-bar blues. And then we move to 4 before the bar is over. Nice little, again, tweak, addition. And then we end up on 1. Now, before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's see how this sounds so far and see how these updated or tweaked portions of the music shift our experience, change our experience of it. So, of course, we're starting out with the classic bars of 1. And then we get to this, which is expected, but instead of another 1, we end up going, and then we return. And just as we return and think, okay, we're back in order, notice this little plus here, which I'll put beside so you can see the actual chord as well. So our second set of 4 bars, rather than being simply, that's what we would expect. Instead we have and we're jumping around a bit more. So we have gives it a little bit more finality there, doesn't it? If we simply go okay, nice pacing, nice consistency, predictability. But this, we're getting a lot of this 5 in here. And it makes it feel almost as if it's a closure, an end, a place of finality. We're going to go back and listen to the music in a moment and see how that shows up, how it affects our experience of what's being sung. But before we do that, let's go on. Let's fill in this last line here. So we have a 5 on this F, then this extra little G minor 7 moving to 4, and then we end up with our 1, which in this case, because we want to go back and do the verse again, we turn around on 5. At the very end, when we get to the outro, all that comes and we end on a 1 with an added 7. But sticking with this, our final 4 bars, we have 5, and this is the extra addition to the pattern, which is, ooh, that colors it a bit more, and then back to here. Okay, so instead we have again a little bit more motion, a little bit more color. Now let's go listen to this. We'll use the first verse with the intro to get us started. Let's clear out our markings because I'm going to mark along as we are traveling through this verse, and we can notice how these harmonic elements impact our listening experience. All right, intro to get us started. All right, here it comes.
Well, I followed her.
There's the 1. The first one. Here's the next one.
With a suitcase
Next one.
in my hand.
Next one.
Yeah, I followed
Okay,
her
this
to
is the 4. And this is the 5. Back to 1. And 5 and 1. And notice how when he sings that, with the suitcase in my hand, we feel this sense of finality as he gets to the end of there.
Yeah, I followed her to the station with a suitcase in my hand. Whoa, it's hard to tell.
Here's the 5 again. We get a G minor, and then continue, yada da da, little flurry of activity there, and then back to 1, and then it pauses before the return. Isn't it interesting to notice how those little moments of harmonic coloration intensify our experience of the lyrics? So these are the 2 things that really stood out to me as I was thinking, why am I so attracted to this? Why did I enjoy this one? And why did I want to return to it? And it has to do with this tension between the different parts of the music. The consistent drums and plucked guitar and the flexible voice and slide guitar. That's the first one. And the second one is the way the harmonic modifications to the form really, I think, enhance our experience, make it a bit more complicated, complex, as we travel through the verse. All of this, of course, in the context of the incredibly, powerfully poetic lyrics. It's just a great piece, isn't it? So that is the Rolling Stones version of Love in Vain. Beautiful, rich, poetic, colorful, deeply expressive, and one of those pieces that you just want to hear, especially when you're in a certain mood. I'll see you tomorrow for the next one.